In this part of our tutorial, we're just going to modify some of the text field attributes, but we're going to change these from within the code itself. So the previous part focused on changing the attributes in the attributes inspector. Now we're going to change them in the code, and this is an important skill to be able to have because sometimes we'll want to have the app running and then have our attributes change while the app is running. And this isn't something you can do in the attributes inspector. This is why we have to go into the code itself. So we're just going to go over some of the more commonly modified attributes. So we're going to be calling our txt text field dot, and then we'll look at some of the attributes, and then we'll look at some of the text attributes as well. Alright, now we're going to take a look at how to modify some of the attributes within the code itself, and this will be our final part of the tutorial. The very last part will just kind of be a summary and an outro of what we've learned so far. So this time we're going to be looking at the viewController.swift rather than the main.storyboard. So I'm just going to shrink this down. I'm going to bring it over to here, and I'm going to close that up, and I'm going to close up the toolbar because we don't really need that anymore. So now we're just going to be focusing on the viewController.swift. So let's just create this function, and this is going to be function modify property, in fact modify text field attributes. Okay, not going to take in any parameters or have return type, and I'm just going to call this in the viewDidLoad function. So modify text field attributes. Good stuff. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the fields or some of the attributes we can modify from the code. Now there are many attributes, so dozens of attributes. I'm not going to go over all of them because quite frankly, you know, we could be here all day if we were going to do that. And also, where's the learning in that? There's no point in me showing you exactly how to do everything because a lot of coding is kind of exploring your options and someone showing you the basics and then you taking those basics and expanding upon them. So I'm going to go over a few of the ones that I use commonly. So the way we're going to do this is if we call text or txt text field and then we go dot, then we get this huge list of attributes that we can modify. So for example, we can add a background image. So we can say txt text field dot background equals and then some kind of UI image. Unfortunately, I don't really have any on this computer, so I can't demonstrate that. We can set the border style. So you remember how we set the border style up from that kind of oval shape to having no border that we see here? Well, if we do this, UI text border style, remember that? And then we say equals UI text border style dot, then it gives us a bunch of options. So we can have none, which we currently have. We can have a rounded rectangle. We can have a line. We can have a bezel. So there's a few different options here. However, this is not going to be something that we often modify from the code itself. Just bear in mind that you can do that. So we can have character range. We can have stuff like descriptions. We can have stuff like draw text in, end of document. We can change the font if we want, so UI font equals UI font, and then dot, and then it gives us this list of different properties and different fonts that we can change from there. So again, I'm not going to modify this from the code itself. This is usually a property that I change in the attributes inspector and then leave, because generally I don't change the font as the app runs. Okay, so let's take a look. This one has text, and each function generally shows you what it does. Here has some kind of a description. This one just kind of indicates whether we actually have any text within that field or not. So this could be useful for if we're trying to pass in information and we want to check first to see if it has any information in that field. We can also insert text into it. We can, there's this boolean is editing, that kind of lets us know whether or not we're currently being edited, or it's currently being edited. We can change the keyboard appearance and the type. So this would be a good idea, like we could change our keyboard type to be some kind of numerical keyboard. So if we go keyboard type equals UI keyboard type dot, and then that gives us a bunch of options. We can do decimal pads, we can do number pads, stuff like email addresses or phone pads. So it might be a good idea to do some kind of like a decimal pad. And let's see what else we can modify. So txt text field dot, and let's see what else. We can change stuff like the text alignment and the text color. We've seen obviously the text field itself, so we've seen that here. It's txt text field dot text. We can change stuff like the text color and the text alignment. So I'm not going to change the alignment, but I will change the text color. So if we scroll back down to, in fact, I'm just going to type it in here, text color. We can change that to, let's say, UI color dot, and then let's just choose a color. Let's just change it to white maybe. And that should be here. So this will just change our text color from what it currently is to white. And in fact, just to kind of show you this, I'm going to go quickly into the attributes inspector and just add some kind of a placeholder. In fact, we already have some text in there. Let's go ahead and assign some text in here first. So we're just going to say, actually, let's leave it. Let's not worry about that. So we'll go txt text field dot, and then let's see what other attributes we like to modify often. And so we can have it centered if we want. We can copy whatever's in there. We can change the frame. We can have, there's all of these booleans that are kind of like is hidden, is highlighted. The is hidden one's a pretty good one because that allows us to hide our text field depending on if we want something to happen. So let's say we have 3 text fields and then there's going to be some point where we actually only want 2. We can change this is hidden to true, and that just hides, it completely hides the selected field. And that's again really great for if your app is getting kind of cluttered up or you no longer need a text field to kind of carry out a certain task. Okay, so that's a good one. We can say is hidden, and I'm just going to actually initialize this to false for now, and then I'm going to change it to true, and we'll see the differences afterwards. So let's just select one more that we might see often, and this could be, let's see what else we could change. We could do tag, or color, or tint, or state. There are lots of different things that we can do here. So, in fact, let's just leave it as this, and we'll modify some of these fields and take a look at how they work. So we're calling this function in our viewDidLoad. So modify text field attributes, so we know it's going to happen. So we're changing the keyboard type, we're changing the text color, and we're just saying it's not hidden for now. So if we run this, let's just see what we get. So to change a keyboard type, we're going to have to go into our simulator and then select the, we're going to have to modify the properties in the simulator itself. And that's going to be the hardware, and then we'll select, the keyboard type and everything from there. So if we select our simulator, or select our emulator here, if we enter some kind of a text, let's say hello, notice it's white now. So instead of that, what did we have before? I believe we had black, that kind of lead color before. It's now changed to white because we changed it in the code here. Now if we change the keyboard type, we change it to a decimal pad. So let's go ahead and display the keyboard. And there we see we get this number pad right here. And that way we can, it's more appropriate because if we try to do hello and then perform the calculation, we get our app crashing. And that's because this is saying, well, we should have taken in an input and converted it to a double, but how can we convert an input that has no numbers in it? So if we go ahead and rerun this, and in fact, I'm going to change this to true, and then we'll see what it looks like now. So let's go ahead and rerun this. So again, that was just changing the keyboard type. We can change that back to normal if we'd like. It just might be a good idea in some cases if you're only accepting number input to kind of take in only, or allow the user to only enter numbers. Otherwise you get this error. But you can also write code to handle those errors. So now notice how our text field is missing. That's because we set our hidden to true. Now, in this particular context, it's not a useful thing to do because now we can't see our edit text. But in other situations, it might be very useful. So again, the first time I used this, I had a calculator with I had a few different functions, and each function might have like 3 or 4 variables. But because some functions had 3 variables and some functions had 4, then I had 4 edit texts, and depending on which function I selected, I only needed 3 or 4 of them. So if I only needed 4, then I could change one to is hidden, so that the user can only input text into 3 out of 4 of them. Okay, so that might be a situation where the is hidden might be useful. And so yeah, there you have it. These are just a few of the text field attributes that I find myself useful to change. If we create this other function, which is going to be modify text field text attributes, we can take a look at modifying some of the text field text itself. So if we go txt text field dot text, not text color, we just want dot text, and then dot, then we get this other list of functions that we can perform. So we can append characters onto the end of it. We can capitalize characters, and that's very useful if we have all lowercase and we want to capitalize everything. We can kind of select the characters, view the string's content as a collection of characters. So rather than a string, it just becomes a character array. We can have contains, and this is checking to see whether it contains the current string. So let's say we had our text field dot text dot contains and then hello, whereas our whole text contained hello world, then we'd return true. And then so that's a good one to use. End index will just get kind of the final or the end index of our string. And same with start index except for the start. And yes, that's all these indexing functions. And we can have a range of characters, and remove all is another one that I find useful. If we want to just change text back to a blank text, or rather an empty string. This I find more useful for labels, however. If we then want to just empty all of the label's contents, we can do that in 2 ways. We can either say lbl_label.text equals and then an empty string, or we can just say text.remove all, and it just removes all of the text from there. Okay, and then we can get substrings. We can change things to uppercase here and change the colors and stuff like that. So we can also change the text color. Oh, we've already done that using the text color attribute. Okay, so if we want to do this, dot capitalized. So produce a string with the first character from each word changed to the corresponding uppercase value. Okay, and what appears to be the issue here, it's unused. That's fine. I'm just going to remove this breakpoint. Okay, so yeah, this is I didn't really change much of the text attributes this time, but it was more to show you how to change them and to show you that you can. I think it's more important for you guys to kind of go in and take a look and try out these functions and attribute changes for yourself to really get a good understanding of how they work, rather than just having me go through and say this is how each one works. Okay, so this is how to modify your text field and your text field text attributes from the code itself. It's a very useful thing to be able to do because we might want to have some kind of an event that changes the text field text. For example, I'm just going to comment this out. What if we have, let's see, just going to close that up. What if we have a button press changing the text color? So let's say we have our button action. The last thing we want to do is we want to say txt text field dot text color. In fact, let's change a background color. Background color equals UI color dot, and then we can choose, let's just change it to cyan or something. So let's go ahead and run this, and we'll see that once the button is pressed, we'll change the background of our text field to the cyan kind of color. And again, this might be something that you might want to do while your code is, yeah, it's a good thing to have, to be able to do this while your code is running. Oh, I see it's hidden, that's why. So we want to change it back to false and rerun it. Yeah, so there's going to be lots of times when you'll want to change these attributes upon when some kind of event happens. So maybe when a button's pressed, want to change a color, or want to change a text or something, or maybe even change the value to, or is hidden to true. Okay, so let's just enter something into here. So let's just say 254. And there we go. So we get two things happening. First is going to be the number is doubled, as it should be, because our double function. And the second thing is that the background color is going to be changed to the cyan color. Okay, so there's an example of modifying some of your attributes within the code itself. Again, very useful thing to do. This is nice because we can modify things as we can modify attributes as the code runs and upon certain events. Whereas if we go into the attributes inspector, that's kind of just how it's going to be for the rest of the code, or for the rest of the time the app is running, and we can't change it. So again, important skill to be able to change your attributes while the code runs. So in this part, we just modified some of the text field attributes using the code itself. So we called our txt text field dot, and then had a huge list of functions and attributes that we could change. So we just changed some of the common ones, such as the is hidden value and the background and text colors as well. So these are some of the more commonly used attributes that will change throughout the code. But there are many, many more that we didn't go over. I think it's just up to you to kind of go in and explore some of the other options and see how they work for yourself. So we also introduced some of the attributes we can modify using the txt text field .text dot. So this is going to modify the actual text within the text field. So that's stuff like we can retrieve stuff, we can add stuff in, and kind of functions like that, which is going to be very useful as well. So a lot of the modification will be more geared towards labels rather than text inputs, because text inputs are going to be more we just want the input and then we want to do something with it, whereas with labels it's going to be displaying stuff, modifying the contents of displays, and stuff like that. Okay, so this was the final part. This next part coming up is just going to be kind of a summary and an outro. So this is going to go over what we've learned so far